Hi, and welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we continue our series of interviews with gubernatorial candidates. A Republican candidate, Sam Rohrer, a state legislator, is our guest today. Then the Chancellor of the state system of higher education provides us with a higher education update. Pennsylvania government and politics, in depth and in detail, and it all starts right now.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, sitting across from me is Sam Rohrer. He's a state house member. I think it's very appropriate to call this guy a reformer. Sam, look, you've been in the legislature a number of years. You're always swimming against the tide in Harrisburg. I think that's safe to say. And we don't have a lot of time, but when I think of you, I think, first of all, as a property tax reformer. I don't want to pigeonhole you, but hasn't that been a good bit of, talk a little bit about that?
Well, it has, Terry. I mean, I have focused a great deal in the past on trying to solve problems rather than talking about it. Right. The property tax is one that's been it's been a problem as long as I've been in the House and before. But there has never, ever really been an attempt to actually fix the problem, change the way we fund, and restore home ownership. And so, yes, we have talked a great deal about the importance of eliminating the school property tax, ultimately all property taxes, but we focused on the school property tax first.
Now, I want to go to your, what you want to do if elected governor and why you're running, but let's just hang on this for a second. Now, you've actually gone as far as say, well, you can't get rid of all that revenue. I can't even remember what the estimate of the total tax revenue is for. Is it $10 billion or something like that?
If you eliminated all local school taxes, it'd be about $10 billion.
That's what I was going to say, about $10 billion. But you say we ought to have another tax to replace it. And you have said what tax? Is it sales tax, income tax?
I have said primarily it should be borne by the sales tax. Of course, there's a couple different ways on how to go about it. You can up the rate or you can broaden the base. We've said keep the tax on the rate the same to keep us competitive with our neighbors. Let's broaden the base, and we use other revenue, including gaming revenue that's already there for property tax and so forth, but primarily borne by the sales tax.
Okay, look, Sam Rohrer is elected governor. I'm getting into this campaign stuff. We're going to do the policy stuff. Sam Rohrer is elected governor. You got three things that you're going to go and you're going to say, this is what I want to do. You may have to go to the legislature and say, this is what I want you folks to do. What are they?
Well, I think one of them is that I do want to eliminate the school property tax and to stabilize and to change the way we're funding public education funding because it's broken and not sustainable. Okay. Number two, we are going to change the climate in Harrisburg relative to the attitude, the culture of ethics and integrity. It is a great need in this Commonwealth, and frankly, to me, it underscores frankly, why we have so many problems. The reason we have pension problems that have just been shoved off into the future. The reason that we have property tax that's never been solved. The reason that we spend, frankly, $4 billion more than we're bringing in per year are all a result of either not telling the truth or resisting the necessity of dealing with problems during our watch. The legislature has been famous for just shoving things off into the future, waiting for after the next election. So the culture will change under a Rohrer administration. We will tell the truth, and we're not going to be here for a special interest. We're here for the people of the state in a genuine, true way. As you know, have been very firm on the fact that when we take our oath to support the Constitution of this Commonwealth, which means we defend the individual rights of the people who live here, to me, that is
well, you've
my
not
goal.
Been afraid, and you've certainly not been afraid of the conservative label. I mean, I think that gets applied to you. But look, one of the things that we've had, and Tom Ridge did it, Governor Rendell did it, previous governors did, use the state as an engine to promote economic development. Yes. Billions of dollars in state bonds. Is that an approach you would use? I
would say generally no, because if it means that we have to borrow and have our kids pay for it in order to spend it today, which has been the mark of the Rendell administration, the answer is absolutely no. That's part of what's gotten us here. But does it mean revising and revamping significantly our business tax climate and our culture, our regulatory climate? The answer is absolutely, unreservedly yes. We have to, but the key is not just raising and borrowing more money. That makes it handy and comfortable for a governor to take and hand out money. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay for that, and that's part of our problem here today. So Changing our climate, absolutely. Reducing taxes, reducing spending, unequivocal, because we have no choice.
Now, we have just about a minute left in this segment. Governor Rendell has said, he's cut some $2 billion out of state government. Virtually all the candidates, and it's a typical argument candidates make for governor, is, well, I can cut more, get rid of more, and make the government more efficient, get rid of waste and corruption and all. Do you still think there's more to cut?
Absolutely, yes, and I don't believe the governor's cut $2 billion.
Yeah.
To say
he said that.
Oh, I know he has. But to say that you've cut when, in fact, you've reduced the amount that you've expected to spend is not a reduction. We're not spending anything less in this government today. We're $28 billion we passed this budget. That's no reduction. We're bringing in revenue at the rate of about $24 billion. That's where the state has to go. All
right, we're talking with Sam Rohrer. This is our series. We're bringing all the gubernatorial candidates in. We're going to give you firsthand ability to check them out on this program. We'll pay some bills. Talking about budgets and bills, we'll pay some bills, and then we'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is sponsored by Citizens to Protect PA Jobs. When businesses add jobs, people prosper. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back. We're talking with Sam Rohrer. He's a Republican candidate. Hey, by the way, why are you, you're running against the Attorney General, you're running against the Congressman. Some might say, well, you're this legislator from Berks County. It's like this David and Goliath story. What's up with that? I mean, what kind of, have you been asked that question?
Well,
you're taking on the citadel, the fortress.
Well, I have, but does that bother me? No, Terry. I have honestly. I feel more compelled to make this decision, which I have to run, than any decision I have made previous in my life, including when I first ran in 1992 for state office.
Right.
I am so concerned about where we are as a Commonwealth. The coinciding of, I would say, of different crises. Fiscal crisis, there's an ethical crisis here in this Commonwealth that I really do fear for the ability of this Commonwealth to be fiscally sustainable and for it to continue to provide a home for the creation of jobs and for people to be able to live. I am concerned about my children. I've been here long enough, 17 years in the House, 15 years in private business. I've got a good understanding of how things ought to work, and I also have a good understanding of how things don't work.
Do you think you're just a lot of people get at a personal point in their life where, I know when Jim Gerlach was on the program, I don't promote one of your opponents, but, he's a good guy, I think you would admit that. And he said, he had spent a good bit of his time in the legislature, and notwithstanding, he just felt, both House and in the Senate in Harrisburg and in the lower house in Congress, and he said, it's just time for me to go do something else. I feel... you kind of get the sense that...
For me, no. I don't have a need. I don't have a need to do something else. That really is not driven by that. I am driven, though, by a genuine sense of what I feel is a duty and a conviction to be a part of an important change here, because we can't continue on the same path that we are, Terry. We just can't. And I believe that my background, my commitment to independence as a candidate, as someone in office, and I frankly say my commitment to the Constitution as the basis for what ought to drive us makes me probably a little bit more distinctive.
All right, the biggest thing that a governor does, as you know, the most important thing is to make this budget address and then to fight for his or her budget programs. Governor Rendell in the midterm budget review said, we could have a $400 million plus deficit, but looking long term, it looks like we're going to be several billions. The state faces, when you look at pensions, pay back the borrowed money, the declining revenues from just the annual intake and outtake of the government. On occasion, the governor said we could stare at a $2 to $3 billion deficit once the federal stimulus money goes away. How daunting a challenge is that?
It's extraordinarily daunting. I have said repeatedly that we probably are 2 years behind California. So that puts things in perspective. California is bankrupt. Pennsylvania is extremely close technically we are now insolvent. That doesn't mean we're bankrupt.
I got it.
But that means that we don't have enough funds and revenue available right now to pay our bills. Therefore, this Commonwealth has two choices. We're going to have to reduce our spending, spend better, spend smarter, or we're going to have to raise taxes out to gazoo. I have said I will not sign a tax increase bill. We cannot afford further tax increases in this Commonwealth, which means, when I say that, then it means that we're going to have to tear apart what we're doing and look at every program. Because, frankly, we're spending a lot of money in programs that we were never ever intended when these departments were put into place years ago. We have to look at education and how we're spending. We have to look at welfare and what we're spending. They're the two big bars in the charts. A different look and different approach.
Yeah. Does that also mean sort of niche taxes? You know, Marcellus Shale, the tax on natural gas formation is, you know, or does it just mean the big taxes?
Well, I mean, I'm talking their general tax increase. There are things, for instance, with Marcellus Shale, and I've been opposed to the severance tax, but I've been opposed to the severance tax while at the same time we have the highest corporate net income tax. Yeah. You can't double penalize any industry. The entire way of how we put together business taxes, for instance, in order to cultivate this economy and encourage businesses to relocate here is only a part of it. The regulatory climate, the labor climate. There's actually three elements that we have to deal with, and that we would deal with those things. But if we go in saying that, well, you know, we're going to spend more, then you're going to spend more. You've got to go in saying, no, we can spend no more, and then it takes and directs your path.
Yeah, before I let you go, I mean, a lot of people are wondering why anyone would want to be governor for the next 4 years. I mean, you've heard that, I'm sure. I mean,
Terry, I have said that to many people. Nobody in their right mind would want to be. Yeah. In my perspective, I thought long and hard about the practical aspect of being here in this position, because being on the chairman of the finance committee now and being involved like having economics, I know the extent of our problems. But I also know that good principles properly applied will work, and we better start applying good principles.
As I've told the other candidates, you're welcome on this program anytime you have things you want to talk about. You give us a call. We're going to have an interesting election this spring and winter and into the spring. It's going to be, I think it's one of the most important gubernatorial elections in our modern history. I think you would agree with that.
I agree with that.
All right, there you have it, Sam Rohrer. All right, coming up, the Chancellor and a special guest. We're going to talk about what else? Higher education. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program, a Higher Education Update. Dr. John Cavanaugh, the Chancellor of the state system. He's sitting right across from me. And I don't know, I think I know who this guy is. What's your name, Dr. Grunenwald?
That'd be Joe.
Grunenwald, Joe, the President of Clarion. Now, look, he's an old friend of mine. I want to tell you about this. Chancellor, I want to say something to you. Number one, we ought to talk about people occasionally who do something good, who lead exemplary lives, who are influenced. And I think on this program what we'll start is we're going to start bringing some people on who actually have accomplished something and do something good. So
that's right.
It's your turn, Chancellor.
Thanks. Well, you know, when you look across the system, there's nobody who has done more or has done it more creatively or entrepreneurially than President Grunenwald. I mean, he's just done an absolutely phenomenal job in all the years he's been at Clarion, but especially since he's been president there.
Yeah. Well, now look, one of the things that I think you're, of course, one of the 14 state system universities. You and I have known each other longer than we're going to talk about on this program, right?
Absolutely.
We won't get into that. But the point is that all universities have had to adapt to the changing needs, particularly when it comes to this economy in our state. Why don't you say a few things to so our viewers get a sense about how you're exemplar of changing colleges. I mean, many of them are doing it talk about yours as sort of an exemplar of what's going on around the country.
Well, certainly the economy in Pennsylvania, but also the changing nature of our demographics have really had an impact on higher education. And the number of students, 18-year-old traditional students that are out there to be recruited into our university is actually going down in the western part of the state and flattens out and goes down somewhat in the eastern part of the state as the years go by. So doing business as usual is simply off the table economically. Keeping that university afloat, keeping it high quality, attracting the kinds of students and faculty members that are needed calls for a different kind of model. And it's a model wrapped around revenue generation, built upon meeting the needs of a region that you serve. Sometimes that means you got to go off campus. You can't do the same old things in the same old way. Sometimes that means you use distance education, you use off-cycle timing, you use real-time education, and sometimes you use streaming video and other technologies to deliver.
So Chancellor, the education is just simply not the way it was when you and I were in undergraduate and graduate school, and it's not likely to ever return.
No, that's right. You know, there will always be a place for the face-to-face traditional classroom. But I think what you're hearing from Joe is that there's also a growing need and demand for anytime, anywhere learning that's flexible, that fits around people's work schedules, because so many more of our students are returning adults who didn't have an opportunity to start college when they were 18. And much of what we do, and certainly at Clarion, an increasing amount of what they do has to do with workforce education and straight-up job skills training.
Yeah, how important is that? I mean, Clarion is there out on Route 80 in the western part of the state. The state system has a number of universities that are sort of what we call in rural areas. And there are many other colleges and universities, as you know. Pennsylvania has more than 100 of them trying to meet. How difficult? I mean, is that in a rural area, especially when you get sort of you're out of the metropolitan areas, to kind of build these programs? Is that a kind of a unique challenge to you? Or is
it is. The workforce that you find in a rural area like that, and we certainly are rural, a county of only 40,000 people, is peculiarly unskilled. There aren't a lot of community colleges around. There aren't a lot of technical providers. So that whole genre of technical education, and here I mean high technology, nanotech, biotech, that sort of thing, but also the traditional technology, HVAC, construction, welding, those kinds of things. There are great gaping needs in our community. So one of the things that we've tried to do is to find a way by utilizing existing resources and putting partnerships and packages together to serve needs in that rural community on the spot, close to the need, close to the workforce. So that's been our...
Yeah, I mean, Chancellor, does this present special needs? I mean, I'm not in the classroom anymore. I spent a good many years there. But now when you're trying to attract students, I mean, the state system has a large number of indigenous students, probably more than any other educational system, maybe with the exception of the community colleges in the state. What kind of special considerations do you have to give when you're trying to attract students, a lot of first-generation students?
Well, I think it's two things. One is a welcoming environment that provides the kinds of educational opportunities that students are looking for. Right. But more importantly, especially for first generation, the support structure necessary to get them through things like financial aid, to make sure that when they get there, they can transition successfully, can deal with any academic issues that they might have had in high school. And Clarion, again, is another great example because there are a couple of ways that first-generation students can come to Clarion. One is to the main campus, but the other is to the branch campus in Venango County in Oil City.
Right. And these are rural places that there wouldn't be an opportunity.
That's right.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. I want to talk a little bit about that because in the studies that I've seen over the years, people still pick colleges based on the region. I mean, particularly when you get to a lot of first-generation students whose parents are not wealthy and who maybe can't and don't want to take on, a huge debt. So education, in a sense, has to come to them. All right, we're talking with the president of Clarion University and the chancellor of the state system. A lot of titles there, but we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
All right, let's talk a little. I mean, when you get down to the core level here, why should our viewer, I mean, why should anybody care? I mean, talk specifically about, you know, a program that you have that people out there can say, this matters, this brings jobs, this educates kids.
One of the big regional needs that we have educationally is to provide technical education, traditional technical. Here, it's as a result of having no community colleges north of I-80 or west of State College. Right. None. That's an entire quarter of this state. And that essentially is our market footprint. We deliver an Associate of Applied Science and Industrial Technology with typical concentrations. So whether it's welding or heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or some really upscale technologies like line worker, substation operator.
So let me interrupt you right here. Now, what we're talking about are real needs in the economy for vocational and professional and skilled jobs that are good paying. Go on. Finish my thought.
Absolutely so. And these kinds of jobs are of crucial need in a rural community. When you're talking, for example, about a line worker program, these are the guys that climb the telephone poles that take care of our power. The average worker is 55 years old, and so half of the workforce goes away in the next 5 years. So we need to provide...
I've not heard that point made before.
We need to provide technical workers that can climb those poles and do that work under power, or we're going to have trouble in our utility system. So we partner with First Energy Corp, where they provide the technical training. We provide general ed and some business introduction, put it together an Associate of Applied Science degree in industrial technology.
And this is just one example of many programs that you can find in a lot of colleges. We're obviously focusing on Clarion here because Joe's here to provide us with an in-depth analysis of what he does. But, Chancellor, this is sort of going on in higher education. Maybe more public universities than private, where they're still, not totally into, still a lot of liberal arts and professional programs. But are public universities been more adaptable in that respect, do you think, a little bit?
I think that's right. Certainly in our case, we see it as a major part of our mission, as Joe pointed out, in the whole quarter of the state that lack community colleges. It's really part of our mission to bring those education programs to those students.
All right, we're out of time. I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about your budget. Will you come back and do that?
Absolutely.
We want to talk a little bit about budget.
Absolutely.
What wouldn't be our program if we didn't talk about state funding for somebody? At any rate, it's great having you on. Good luck with your future. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, you stay well.